Hello and welcome to this video on section 1 of the Hire Design and Manufacture question paper. Before we get started, there's a number of key revision resources that you should be aware of. Google Classroom is one of the most important ones. That's where you'll find all of your revision resources being posted by your teacher, as well as links to SVA past papers. But you'll also find in the Classwork tab all of your work organised by topic. This means you can look for specific topics and revise them using the activities and notes that you've previously used in class. You'll also find links to things like Wordwall and Quizlet that might also be helpful. Another link that will have been put on your Google Classroom by your teacher is a link to the Achieve Learning site, along with sign up and registration details on how to get started with that. On the Achieve site, you'll find links to notes, descriptors of different topics, as well as some practice questions. You'll find videos that link to other learning, and you'll find links directly to specific past paper questions on that topic. Finally, the @LHS Technologies YouTube channel has a range of videos that you can revise with. These videos include ones like this, which will show you example and model answers of how to respond to past paper questions.
In the final exam, section 1 usually always consists of the same style of questions, and it gives you a total of 25 marks for that section. On the first page, you're given 2 products with the details of the materials for each part and its retail price. And this section is looking for you to be able to compare and contrast the different design features of the products and using your knowledge of the key topics such as materials, manufacture, design issues, justify or explain your answers. It is important that you refer clearly to both products in your answers for all of the questions in section 1. The questions in section 1 can differ, but usually 1A and 1B will all focus on materials and manufacturing processes. These questions never change. The remaining 3 or 4 questions usually focus on other design issues such as function, safety, aesthetics, ergonomics, and they can also cover other aspects of the course, things like standard sizes and components, like you can see in the example questions below. When you first begin practicing these questions, it's sometimes helpful to tick the materials which you know the properties of off the top of your head straight away. You might not know every single material and its properties, but this will help you to establish which ones you can actually write an answer for just now. So for example, for the Risotorp kitchen trolley, off the top of my head, I know the properties of the aluminium mesh trays, the pine handle, the nylon caster wheels and wheel bearings, and the stainless steel wheel bolts. So already I've got 4 at least materials that I know I can write an answer for this one trolley. For the other trolley, you will be able to write about some of the materials and the properties of that one as well. When you're writing these questions, it's really important to consider the vocabulary that you use because some terms are more suitable than others. Try to avoid using the same property in more than one answer. So for example, if you know that 2 different metals are both corrosion resistant, don't repeat corrosion resistance as an explanation in another answer. You can also substitute terms for more official sounding ones instead of saying something like the material doesn't rust. Say something about corrosion resistance instead, just to help improve your use of the right terminology. And try not to use the term strong incorrectly or because you don't have another explanation. Make sure you understand the difference between strength, hardness, and toughness because they all mean something different. It's not just a go-to answer and you're unlikely to pick up a mark just for writing if something is strong. So the question 1A for the 2 kitchen trolleys that you've been given is asking you to explain why the materials chosen are suitable for these products for 6 marks. It's usually always worth 6 marks, this question, so it would make sense for you to write 3 explanations for the first product and 3 explanations for the second. That might not always be possible depending on how strong your knowledge of material properties are, but any combination of 6 explanations, as long as the answer covers both products, will be acceptable. So make sure, even if you are only covering 2 properties of the first product, you cover 4 for the other products to a maximum of 6. Or you might even do 5 for the first one. As long as one of your explanations covers the other trolley, then you've covered both products in your answer. So what is a valid explanation? Each individual explanation should be structured like this. The statement first, introduce the material and product you're explaining. Why should you do this? It makes it explicitly clear to the marker and shows that you've covered both the products in your answer. If you can say, I'm talking about this part and this product. Secondly, give your reason. So this is where you're showing your knowledge of the material and its properties. Why should you do this? That's where you're going to get your mark from. And lastly, do link it back to the product. So explain why it's suitable for the product and think about what this particular part of the trolley is used for. This demonstrates that you have higher level ability to make connections between the choice of materials and the design of the product. So, in full, that explanation would read like this. That explanation in full would get you 1 of your 6 marks. Yes, it does seem like you're waffling a lot, but not all of your answers will have to have as long an explanation. With 6 explanations structured in this way, you should be looking to write about half a page of A4 for question 1A alone. This would be an example of a perfect answer. I'm not going to read it through. I've tried to give you the green ticks to show you where you would pick the marks up. And as you can see, not all of the explanations are as long as others. So I'm going to continue on with your answering technique for section 1 questions for the higher design and manufacture exam. Today I'm going to look at the section 1B questions, which usually focus on manufacturing processes that would be used to mass produce the products that you're given on the first page. This time you only need to identify 3 processes from across the 2 products. But again, it might be useful when you're practicing these questions at first to tick or highlight which parts of the product you know the process for in the first instance. So for the Rise Torque kitchen trolley, off the top of my head, I know the processes used for the tubular frame, the pine handle, the nylon caster wheels and bearings, and the stainless steel wheel bolts. So I've put a tick beside those. When you're answering these questions, they usually always are worth 6 marks again. You will get a mark for each correct manufacturing process that you're able to identify, and a mark for each correct justification or explanation that relates to the part or the product that you're talking about. It's important to note that finishing processes are also acceptable answers here. So if you can tell that the product has been powder dip coated or galvanised, those would also be acceptable processes to write about. All 3 of your answers should be for a different process. So if you know that parts from one trolley and parts from the second trolley are both injection moulded, only write about one injection moulded part. Try and get 3 different processes. And your 3 answers must cover both products, but that should be easy enough to do. There's plenty of parts to talk about for both products. What is a valid answer? So again, we're using a similar structure to before. You're going to want to introduce the process and part you're explaining as your statement. So injection moulding would be used for the nylon caster wheels of the Rise Torque trolley. Why do we do this? It introduces the process that you've identified, and that's where you're going to get your first mark from. And it also introduces what product you're talking about, making it easier for the marker to see clearly what product you're mentioning here. Your next stage is to give your reason. So this is where you're going to show your knowledge of the process and the identifying features of that process. So for injection moulding, we know that that would provide accurate repeatability. Why do we do this? This is where you pick up your second mark. So if you can give a correct justification for your process from the statement part, you should be able to get your 2 marks. And lastly, you want to link back. So explain why it's suitable for this part or product. So for this example, it's going to provide accurate repeatability for all 4 wheels of the trolley to be identical. And again, the reason we do this is because it rounds off your answer and it demonstrates your higher ability to link back to the product itself. So in full, you would get 2 marks for that explanation, your correct identification of injection moulding for the caster wheels because it's a plastic product, and also your correct justification of accurate repeatability to give you identical wheels. It's a good succinct answer and it gives you 2 marks. You get 1 for your process, like I've said, and 1 for your explanation. With 3 explanations structured in this way, you're probably going to be looking to write about a third of a page of A4 for question 1B. It's sometimes possible to pick up half of the available marks per explanation, even if you've got the wrong process for a particular part. They do what we call positive marking with the SQA, and if your explanation or justification for the process is correct, you might still get a mark for that. So if you had, for example, said for the nylon caster wheels that die casting was the appropriate process, which we know is not the case because die casting is for metal, you wouldn't get the mark for the process. But if you had also said something about high quality finish or accurate repeatability, you would get the mark because that is an appropriate explanation for die casting as well. So you would get 1 out of the 2 marks for an answer like that. A perfect answer would look like this. You can easily write 3 simple explanations, making sure you refer to the product in every explanation to pick up 6 marks there. So we've talked about 3 different processes: injection moulding, extrusion, and CNC routing. And I've given an appropriate justification using identifying features to gain the 6 marks there. And that is how you would answer a section 1B question. We're now going to move on to look at section 1 ergonomics questions, where we're still comparing and contrasting the designs of the 2 products that you're given on page 1 of your higher design and manufacture exam. Ergonomics questions in section 1 are usually quite heavily weighted and are a really easy way to pick up solid marks if you know how to be specific enough in your answer. This is something that we have practiced quite well at National 5 level, and most of you have picked up really well when writing ergonomics answers and being specific about the parts and the body parts that you're talking about in those answers. So this is something that you can carry on from National 5 experience. As always with section 1, you must refer to both products in your answer, and in this example we're looking at 2 different children's scooters. Importantly though, ergonomics has 3 different aspects to it, so it's really important that you carefully read the question to establish what you should actually be writing about. And I'm going to go through some examples of that next. So this first example, describe how ergonomics has influenced the design of both scooters, for 5 marks. When answering this question, you need to refer to all 3 aspects of ergonomics and mention both scooters when you're answering this one. So you should be looking to talk about anthropometrics, physiology, and psychology in your answer. However, a question which asks you to describe how physiology and psychology have influenced the design of both scooters, for 4 marks, you should only refer to physiology and psychology whilst mentioning both scooters here. Answers relating to anthropometrics will gain you 0 marks. So there's no point writing about anthropometrics when they're not asking you to talk about it here. Please read the question and then read it again. You should be reading your questions over at least twice before you start writing your answers. Get into the habit of doing that, please, guys. So, when you're asked to describe how ergonomics as a whole has influenced the design of scooters, you've got the potential to pick up 5 marks here out of 25. You're going to want to start with anthropometrics because that's probably the aspect of ergonomics that you're most familiar with, and it can be the easiest to write about. And to try and cover all the marks, both scooters for 2 different marks here should be quite easy, because there are multiple parts that your body is interacting with here that you're going to need to know the sizes for. This will leave you with 3 more marks to cover physiology and psychology using both scooters. Physiology again should be simple enough to cover for the product that you've been given, and for 2 different marks, leaving your last mark to go towards psychology. Now that combination might not always work for the products you're given, but it can be easily adjusted to ensure all 3 aspects and both products are covered for the marks allocated. So you might end up writing 3 points for physiology, 1 for anthropometrics, and 1 for psychology, or whatever other combination. As long as you cover all 3 aspects and you talk about both scooters or both products in your answer, you should be fine. So again, using that similar structure to before, statement, evidence, and link. Your statement part is going to introduce the aspect of ergonomics and product you're discussing, and that makes it really clear to the marker. So in an ergonomics question, say anthropometrics specifically has influenced the design of the skate scooter, whatever product you're talking about. For your evidence, you're going to provide your reasoning and explain it, but here is where you need to be very specific. This is your higher level ability coming in. Be explicit with the size and part of the product and the size and part of the body that you're referring to gain the mark here. So the length of the handlebar will consider the shoulder width of a child. If you know what the target market is for your product, mention them. If you know it's a product for children, make sure it's children you mention in your answer, but if it's for adults, you could just say human body. And then again, link and relate back to the product. Again, it's going to round off your answer and demonstrate that higher ability, making sure that the product is comfortable to hold and manoeuvre. That would get you 1 mark. It does involve more time and detail, and you're going to have to write more to gain the marks here, but it's really worth putting in the effort at this stage. If you can maximise the amount of marks you get in section 1, it stands you in really good stead for the rest of the exam paper. This answering structure works for pretty much all design issues questions and was used for writing that physiology answer that's below as well. So very similar structure, and introducing the aspect and the product, given the reasoning. So going back to the ergonomics example for physiology that we discussed from the last video, making sure that you are being specific about the aspect of ergonomics that you're talking about in the first instance using your statement, and also mentioning exactly what product you're talking about is going to make it very, very clear to the marker exactly what product and what aspect you're talking about. So if they need to skim over to total up your marks, it's clear to see for them because you have written it on the page. Given your evidence, making sure you're being specific about the force required or the pressure or the size or the part that you are talking about, and then saying how that's been influenced in the design. So what have they actually had to do there? They've had to develop the steering mechanism, so they would need to know the force required to turn the handlebar, so that your link here, it can be turned easily by a child, because we know that's the target market, without causing any strain to them. That's the important thing about physiology. It's all about physical interaction and not causing strain and being safe to use. Psychology can be probably the most difficult part of ergonomics to write about, so I've done an additional slide on this to help you with answering these aspects in ergonomics questions. The important thing to remember about psychology is that it's all about how design features will make the user feel. And it'll usually be influenced by either functional or aesthetic features. So things like if there are barriers, straps, or safety features like emergency stops. If the designer has used colour coding or colour contrast to highlight moving parts or features. If there are textured areas or materials on different parts or features, or if they've used a rounded form or shape. So for example, the skate scooter has 2 rounded ball shapes added to the end of the handlebar, which will act as a safety barrier to prevent a child's hand from slipping off. Looking at that, that's going to psychologically make that child feel more safe and secure when they're using that scooter, because they're going to think when they see it, that's going to stop my hands from slipping off. The design of the kick scooter uses contrasting colours for the adjustable parts, and that again will psychologically make it easy for the user to understand where the moving parts are, whether that be the child or the parent. Psychology doesn't just have to be about making you feel safe. It can make it feel more fun. It can make things easier to understand. So make sure that when you're answering psychology questions, because it can be a little bit more complex, that you're talking about the feeling that it gives, and you're not just talking about the aesthetic qualities, because we know that aesthetics has a strong influence on psychology, but you need to make sure that you're talking about how that influences the user's experience or feelings when you're answering a psychology question. And this would be a perfect answer for an ergonomics question. There are 2 separate points about anthropometrics for each scooter. So the first one is anthropometrics for the skate scooter. The second is anthropometrics for the kick scooter. Then there are 2 points for physiology. First one for physiology in the skate scooter, second for physiology in the kick scooter, and the 5th point at the bottom to get the 5th mark is considering psychology for the skate scooter in this example, but there are psychological aspects that you can talk about for the kick scooter as well. The SQA do not pick products that you're not going to be able to write answers to. The products are there and they've been chosen for a reason to allow you to be able to write an appropriate answer for it. So never feel like there's absolutely nothing that you could write about for any of the products that you've been given. And that is how you would write an ergonomics answer for section 1. So to continue on with our exam practice answering technique for section 1 questions for higher design and manufacture, we're going to now look at the remaining questions from section 1. There's usually about another 3 or 4 at least questions for section 1 to give you up to your total of 25 marks. The remaining questions still refer to the design of the two products from page 1, but they'll focus mostly on design issues and other aspects of design and manufacture. You're now being asked to compare and contrast the features of each product and how they differ to one another in terms of function, aesthetics, market, etc. And these questions can be approached mostly all in a similar way to you did in questions A and B, with the statement, evidence, link structure. So there's some examples of questions that are given for the two trolleys that we've been working on the last couple of questions. There's one there about aesthetics and target market, function, performance, and then the last one about standard components. So looking at the aesthetics question first of all, aesthetics questions are looking for you to identify and describe the aesthetic qualities of each product and how they compare to one another. So using your aesthetic vocabulary here is really useful, referring to colour, contrast, texture, fashion, style, form. They are all really important words to be using in your answers here. Sometimes with these questions, they might add in something about target market to allow you to demonstrate your knowledge of how aesthetic design can appeal to different target markets. So there might be two aspects to these sorts of questions. There won't always be, sometimes they will just be asking you about aesthetics. So for example, if the design is modern, it's going to appeal to a younger market, and if it's a more traditional looking design, that will appeal to an older market. As always, you need to refer to both products in your answers here. So using that statement, evidence, link structure, firstly, you're going to want to introduce your answer and the product. So we're talking about aesthetics here. So aesthetics has influenced the design of the Risatorp trolley in that you're mentioning the product and what you're talking about here. Then you're going to give your evidence and provide your reasoning and explain it. So the shapes and forms used are simple and slim. You're then going to link it. So you're going to relate your evidence to the similarities or differences of the design of the other product. And this is how you can actually extend and expand this answer to potentially pick up 2 marks for one statement itself, because you can then refer to aesthetic qualities of the other design just by linking it back to your first answer. So compared to the more bulky form of the Beckfilm trolley. That on its own would pick up 2 marks because you're mentioning aesthetic qualities of the Risatorp trolley and that it uses simple and slim shapes and forms, and then you're going on to compare that to the more bulky forms of the other products. So you are referring to both products and 2 different aesthetic qualities for those products, so that would gain 2 marks. You could then further extend this part of your answer to cover target market as a way of gaining additional marks just for this one part. So to extend that answer, this would make the Risatorp trolley appeal to a younger target market as the simple design is more modern, whereas the Beckfilm trolley has a more traditional design which would appeal to an older target market. So that answer has gained up to 4 marks because it's referring to different elements of aesthetics and target market for both products. We're now going to look at section 1 questions which focus on function. So we're going to use the same structure that we have been using for previous questions with the statement, evidence, link structure. This question is asking you to describe 5 functional issues that will have influenced the design of each of these products. So this time we're looking at 2 bread bins. So I've changed up the products for this example. Functional issues simply refer to the aspects of the design that improve the primary and secondary functionality of the product. And sometimes safety will be added into these questions to allow you to demonstrate how function and safety are interlinked in design. So similarly to when target market gets tagged onto an aesthetics question, sometimes they will add in safety to a function question. Always think about what you would expect and want this product to do well. So for a bread bin, for example, you're going to expect it to keep the bread covered and airtight so that it stays fresh, and you're going to want it to be safe and easy to use and clean. In your answer, as always, make sure you refer to both bread bins. So using the statement, evidence, link structure again, firstly introduce your answer and the product. So function has influenced the design of the armadillo bread bin. Your evidence now providing your reasoning and explaining it, because the designer has developed hinged lid sections that can be used to cover the bread to keep it fresh. So that's you mentioning the functional aspect of the design here. Then you're going to link it and relate your evidence to the similarities or differences, or sometimes even the successes or failures of the design of the other product. However, the lid design of the Joseph bread bin will provide a more airtight seal for the bread because it is one part compared to the armadillo lid design. So this answer would gain 2 marks because you're referring to functional issues of both products by comparing them to one another. You've made sure that you've been clear in what products you're talking about when, and you've mentioned different functional aspects and whether they are successful or unsuccessful in your answer. To extend this, if you needed to pick up marks for safety, you could then add on something about the part of the design of the Joseph bread bin considering safety more fully than the armadillo bread bin, because the armadillo bread bin has multiple sliding folding lid sections, and that provides a higher risk of finger traps than the simple one-part lid design of the Joseph. That answer, tagged on to the original answer about functional aspects, has the potential to gain up to 4 marks because again you're referring to different elements of function and safety for both products.
Thanks for watching this video, and remember to use Google Classroom, the Achieve Learning website, and at LHS Technologies on YouTube to continue with your revision.